Good morning and welcome to our time of prayer and reflection for today. I wonder if any of you have ever experienced discrimination, exclusion, or racism. If you've ever had people making judgments about you based on the color of your skin, based on your gender, based on your orientation, or anything else that might apply. I wonder if you know how that feels for people to make those judgments and then to ostracize you as a result. I remember a couple of years ago, at the time I lived up in Huddersfield, when there were all of the protests around the Black Lives Matter movement. I wonder if you remember that. It was largely sparked by men like George Floyd and Trayvon Martin, who were unjustly killed by the police in America. And it's believed that they were killed purely because they were black and the police made assumptions about them that were unfair, unjust, and wrong. And as a result, people of all races and nationalities, not just in America, but around the world, stood up and protested and said, no, this is wrong. It's not right to make judgments about other people based on who they are. Now, I'd like you to hold that image in your mind as we read our gospel reading for today. Our gospel is taken from Luke chapter 17, verses 11 to 19, and it says this. Now, on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, Jesus, Master, have pity on us. When he saw them, he said, Go and show yourselves to the priests. And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back, praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner? Then he said to him, Rise and go. Your faith has made you well. At the time that this story happened, the people who were ostracized or who experienced discrimination were the people who lived in Samaria, otherwise known as Samaritans. And we have a couple of clues in this story. The first thing is when it says that Jesus is traveling along the border between Samaria and Galilee. So he's already on the border between 2 communities that are bitterly divided, basically along lines of racism. Then the story carries on, and these men are sick, these 10 men are sick, and Jesus heals them. But 9 just go away, and only 1 actually comes back to say thank you to Jesus. And that one who comes back is a Samaritan. Now, that is basically a way of showing that when we make assumptions about who people are or how we believe they're going to behave based on distinctive characteristics like their race, their skin color, their gender, their orientation, or anything else like that, that we're almost sure to be getting it wrong, to be making discriminatory judgments. Because Jesus is pointing out to those who are watching and listening, look, the one who came back to say thank you to me is the one who you would have least expected would do so. The person who you would have automatically excluded from your community based on his race, this Samaritan. Basically, what Jesus is trying to say in this story is that the judgments and the assumptions and the racist exclusions that we make about people are wrong, because he's using this illustration of a Samaritan who comes back and says thank you. So in other words, this person is just as holy, just as much a person of faith, just as much worthy of God's regard as everyone else is who lives in the other community of Galilee. So I'd like you to think about what judgments you might have made about others, maybe here in this school, maybe in the community where you live. I wonder if you have ever made judgments or excluded someone based on the color of their skin, based on their gender, based on their orientation, based on their disability, or anything else. Because if you have, you're almost certain to have gotten it wrong. Because who a person is so much more than their identity in these ways. Our identities are part of us, but it's wrong to make judgments and assumptions and exclusions on that basis. And Jesus is basically saying that here, that everybody is worthy of God's regard, everybody is worthy of God's healing, and everybody is worthy of God's notice. I hope that as you're going about your daily lives today, this week, this month, that if you're tempted to make judgments about someone, particularly based on how you look or what you see of them, that you will be able to stop yourself and say, hang on a second, that's a human being who is created in God's image just in the same way that I am and is worthy of my respect. I hope that might be a challenge for you this week. For now, as we finish, I'd love to pray for you. Gracious God, I pray that you would help all of us to avoid making judgments about others, to avoid discriminating against others, even where we don't intend to, but that you would help us to remember that everyone is your image and is worthy of respect and inclusion. We ask these things in your holy name. Amen. I'll see you all soon.